The rain in Seattle has a way of making you feel completely alone. It was one of those nights, almost midnight, the city lights just a blur against my apartment window. The whole world felt muted, and then my phone lit up. It didn't ring, just a new voicemail. My heart stopped when I saw the name. Daniel Miller. My brother. The one who vanished 3 years ago. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely press play. The first thing I heard was a shaky breath, then his voice. A voice I thought I'd never hear again. He was whispering, terrified. Emmy, I don't have much time. The words were rushed, desperate. Listen to me. Don't trust, and then nothing. Just a harsh crackle of static, and the message was over. I just stared at the phone, tears blurring my vision. It couldn't be him. But it was. I knew his voice better than my own. The room suddenly felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. I must have replayed that message a dozen times, leaning in closer, trying to hear something, anything in the static. A background noise, a clue, a word I missed. Why now, why call yesterday, after 3 years of absolute silence? And where was he calling from? My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to break right out of my chest. All the old wounds, the guilt I'd carried since the night he disappeared, it all came rushing back. I remember our last conversation, the argument we had. The last time he called me, that same night, I didn't answer. I've lived with that choice every single day. I picked up the phone, my knuckles white from gripping it so tight, and whispered to the empty room, Daniel, how are you calling me? This wasn't just a random call. It was a message, a warning, and a desperate plea for help. And I knew, standing there in the middle of my small, lonely apartment, that I had to find out what happened to my brother, no matter what it cost me. Sleep was impossible. The rain just kept coming down, turning the city into this endless wash of grey and silver. I sat on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, just replaying the voicemail. Each time, that static at the end felt like a door slamming shut. I tried calling the number back, of course. Over and over. But it was always the same, a dead line. No ring, no connection, just nothing. It was like calling a ghost. The guilt was eating me alive. That last call he made, the one I ignored, what if he was in trouble then? What if I could have helped him? 3 years of what-ifs were crashing down on me all at once. I forced myself to think, to analyze, to listen beyond his words. Was that wind I heard in the background? The hum of machinery? Distant footsteps. I strained to make sense of it, but it was just a mess of noise and fear. Don't trust. Don't trust who? The police, our parents, me. The possibilities were endless. And each one was more terrifying than the last. He was trying to warn me about something. And I had no idea what it was. As the sun came up, painting the sky in shades of grey I knew all too well, a new feeling started to push through the fear and guilt, determination. I couldn't just sit here. I had to do something. I had to start looking for him again. And I knew exactly where to begin. Daniel had an old storage unit, a place I hadn't dared to visit since the police officially declared the case cold. It was time to face the ghosts. Driving there, my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. The storage facility was one of those bleak, industrial places on the outskirts of the city. Finding his unit felt like stepping back in time. The air inside was thick with dust and the smell of forgotten things. Boxes were stacked against the walls, untouched, as if he had just stepped out for a moment and would be right back. It was heartbreaking, after a few minutes of just standing there. Breathing it all in, I started searching. Most of it was just old stuff, books, clothes, things from our childhood. Then I saw it. A single box, tucked away in the back corner, with the word private scrawled on the side in his familiar handwriting. My breath caught in my throat. I pried the lid open, and the dust danced in the single beam of light from my phone. Inside, things got strange. There was a torn map of Seattle, with several abandoned buildings circled in red ink. Tucked beside it was a small leather notebook filled with cryptic symbols and frantic, paranoid notes. They're watching me. Not safe to talk. If anything happens to me, Emma has to know. My chest tightened with every word I read. Who were they? What did he get himself into? Then I found a burned photograph. It was Daniel, standing next to another man. But the man's face was half-charred, a gaping black hole where his features should have been. It sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't just some random disappearance. Daniel was running from something or someone as I was about to close the box. My fingers brushed against something taped to the very bottom. It was a small USB drive with a piece of tape over it that said, "Play me first." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This had to be the answer. I rushed back to my apartment, my mind racing a million miles an hour. I didn't even bother to take my coat off. I jammed the USB into my laptop, my fingers fumbling. A video file popped up. I clicked on it, and the screen flickered to life. And there he was, Daniel. He looked exhausted, his eyes wide with a terror I'd only heard in his voicemail. He looked right into the camera, right at me, and spoke, "If you're seeing this, I don't know how much time I have. Stay away from anyone asking about my work. You can't trust." A sudden, loud bang sliced through his words. Daniel jumped, his face a mask of terror. And then the screen went black. The call was over. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. Her phone vibrated violently in her hand, buzzing against her sweaty palm. An unknown number flashed on the screen. A knot of dread tightened in her stomach, but she had to answer. She swiped right. Silence. Then a voice. It was deep, electronically distorted, a chilling, inhuman sound that made the hair on her arm stand up. "Stop digging into Daniel Miller," the voice rasped. "If you continue, you'll disappear just like he did." The line went dead. For a moment, pure, unadulterated fear paralyzed her. They knew she was looking for him. They were watching her. But as the initial shock subsided, a new emotion began to bubble up, hot and fierce, anger. Raw, unyielding anger. Who were these people? They had taken her brother, and now they had the audacity to threaten her. Her fear didn't disappear, but it was now fuel for a burning fire of determination. She glanced out her window, a habit she'd developed over the past few weeks. This time, something was different. A black SUV, sleek and menacing, was parked across the street. It hadn't been there before. She couldn't see through the tinted windows, but she didn't need to. She could feel it. Someone was inside, watching her every move. The threat wasn't just a voice on the phone anymore. It was real, and it was right outside her door. Instead of shrinking away, Emma grabbed Daniel's old, leather-bound notebook. His last message to her. It was filled with cryptic notes, complex equations, and frantic scribbles she was only just beginning to decipher. She flipped through the worn pages, her fingers tracing his familiar handwriting. There, on a creased page near the back, was a map of the local area, and circled in red ink was a location, an abandoned research facility on the outskirts of town, a place that had been shut down for years. Daniel had been there. She had to go. The facility was even more derelict than she'd imagined. Rusting fences, shattered windows, and an eerie silence that was somehow louder than any noise. Emma slipped through a gap in the fence, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. She found a side door pried open and stepped into the darkness. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. Using her phone's flashlight, she navigated the labyrinth of corridors until she found a small security office. Miraculously, one of the monitors flickered to life when she hit a switch. Archived footage. She fast-forwarded through hours of static until an image made her freeze. It was Daniel. He was running for his life down the very same hallway she was now standing in. His face was etched with panic. Behind him, two large men in dark suits were in close pursuit. She watched, breathless, as Daniel ducked into a side passage and burst through an emergency exit, disappearing into the overgrown woods beyond the facility. He had escaped. At least, he had that day. He found something he wasn't supposed to. Emma gasped and spun around, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. A man emerged from the shadows. He was older, with kind eyes shadowed by weariness. "My name is Doctor Hayes," he said, his voice a low whisper. "I used to work here. I knew your brother." He explained that Daniel, a brilliant researcher himself, had uncovered a series of illegal neurological experiments being conducted at the facility. They were testing dangerous, mind-altering technologies on unwilling subjects. When Daniel threatened to go public, he became their primary target. He wasn't just a whistleblower, he was a liability they had to eliminate. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the main entrance. The sound of splintering wood and shattering glass. Hayes's face went pale. "They found us," he whispered, his eyes wide with terror. He grabbed her arm. "We have to go, now." They ran, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous building. They scrambled down a dark service tunnel, the shouts of men growing closer behind them. Just as they neared an exit, a hand shot out from a dark alcove and grabbed Hayes. He cried out, a sound of pure agony. "Run, Emma, just run." He yelled as he was dragged back into the shadows. Emma didn't look back. She burst out into the cold night air and didn't stop running until the world was a blur of tears and burning lungs. Back in the relative safety of her apartment, she was shaken to her core. Doctor Hayes was gone. They had him. But he had confirmed it. Daniel was a target. And now, so was she. She spread Daniel's notebook out on her coffee table, the pages a chaotic map of his mind. She had to find the next clue. Her eyes scanned every drawing, every note, and then she saw it. Tucked away in the corner of a page, almost hidden, was a hand-drawn map of the old city train yard. And in the margin, in Daniel's tiny, precise script, were the words, safe route. Last option. Her mind raced, replaying the distorted voicemail. And then she heard it. Underneath the chilling words, a faint, rhythmic sound she hadn't noticed before. The distant, mournful wail of a train horn. It wasn't just a map. It was a message. The train yard was a ghost town of rusting boxcars and skeletal tracks under the dim moonlight. Emma moved cautiously through the shadows, every creak and groan of metal making her jump. She followed the path from Daniel's map until she reached a secluded siding. And there, leaning against a graffiti-covered freight car, was a figure. He was limping, his clothes were tattered, but even in the darkness, she knew. She would know him anywhere, Daniel. She breathed. He turned slowly, his face illuminated by the pale moonlight. It was him. Thinner, haunted, but it was him. Their eyes locked across the distance, a chasm of years, of pain, of unanswered questions, but also of an unbreakable bond and a deep, abiding love. And then the world exploded in light. Blinding floodlights ignited from all directions, turning the night into a harsh, sterile day. Men in dark tactical uniforms swarmed from behind the train cars, from the rooftops, from everywhere. They were surrounded, Daniel. Emma screamed, and she ran. She ran toward him, her only thought to get to him, to shield him. Someone grabbed her from behind, strong arms wrapping around her like a vice. She saw Daniel fighting, desperately trying to reach her, but he was quickly overpowered, swarmed by faceless figures. Emma clawed, kicked, and screamed his name until her voice was raw, but it was no use. The chaos was absolute, a whirlwind of motion and shouting that dissolved as quickly as it began. And then silence. A profound, deafening silence. The lights went out. The men were gone. And Daniel was gone again. Emma collapsed onto the cold, unforgiving gravel, the sobs racking her body. She had been inches away. She had seen him, spoken to him. He was real. And they had taken him again. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in shades of grey and pink, Emma sat in her car, shattered but strangely calm. The grief was a physical weight, but underneath it, a tiny, resilient spark had been ignited. Tonight was not just a tragedy. It was proof. Proof of what she had barely dared to hope for all these years. Daniel was alive. And he had reached out to her. He needed her help. She wiped the tears from her face, the salt stinging her cheeks. She took a deep, steadying breath, her gaze fixed on the rising sun. "I'm not giving up on you," she whispered to the empty air. Not again. Whoever these people were, they thought they could erase her brother. They thought they could scare her into silence. They didn't know Emma Miller. She would follow every clue. She would step into every shadow. She would face every danger. Hope is a dangerous thing, but right now it was all she had, and she would not stop until she brought her brother home. Thanks for watching. If you're as invested in Emma's journey as I am, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next.